John R. Cash was born on February 26, 1932, in Kingsland, Arkansas, into a family that weathered storms with grit rather than glamour. His father, Ray, worked the soil with hardened hands, while his mother, Carrie, infused the home with hymns that floated above the dust. They lived in Dias Colony, a New Deal agricultural resettlement community where backbreaking labor on cotton fields forged young Johnny's earliest understanding of life. Pain was ordinary, and song was a relief. From the beginning, his voice held something different. It wasn't trained, it wasn't polished, but it carried something that made even older folks stop and listen. Carrie recognized it early. She sang folk tunes and spirituals as she worked, and Johnny often harmonized beside her. While Ray pushed discipline and toil, Carrie nurtured warmth and melody. Johnny's childhood was shaped by more than calloused hands and Southern hymns. The defining moment came in 1944, when his older brother Jack, the sibling he admired most, died in a tragic sawmill accident. Jack was just 15. His death devastated Johnny, leaving behind a wound that would never fully heal. The loss haunted him for decades. It wasn't just grief, it was guilt. Jack had gone to work while Johnny stayed home. That decision, and what followed, burned a hole into his memory. This sorrow would later rise in his lyrics, the sound of a boy who had seen too much too young, forever seeking absolution in the echo of his own voice. After Jack's death, Johnny changed. He withdrew, growing quieter and more contemplative. Music became his refuge. At school he wasn't loud or disruptive. He was a shadow humming with ideas. His fascination with gospel deepened. The radio, that magical box crackling with stories and songs, became his world. When not picking cotton or milking cows, he practiced guitar and wrote lyrics. His early songs were shaped by freight trains, dusty roads, lost souls, and scripture. He didn't want to perform for attention. He wanted to reach people the way Hank Williams and Roy Acuff reached him, straight through the chest. In 1950, following high school, Johnny left Arkansas behind and enlisted in the United States Air Force. His deployment took him to Landsberg, Germany, where he worked as a Morse code operator. Even in uniform, surrounded by wires and radios, he kept a guitar close. He wrote, he listened, and he practiced. This period, isolated, structured, and full of longing, allowed him to refine his voice. He wasn't dreaming of fame, he dreamed of singing with meaning. It was during these years that he wrote one of his most enduring songs, Folsom Prison Blues. Inspired by a documentary he watched overseas, the lyrics conjured a man tormented by confinement and remorse. Though written far from any prison, the song captured a raw honesty that listeners would feel immediately upon hearing it. When he returned to the States in 1954, Johnny settled in Memphis, Tennessee. He married Vivian Liberto, a woman he had corresponded with during his service. Together they began a family that would grow to include 4 daughters. But Johnny's obsession with music left little room for stability. He began selling appliances door to door, but his mind remained elsewhere. He knocked on doors, yes, but in the evenings he knocked on those of radio stations and studios. Eventually he found himself at the doorstep of Sam Phillips. The label that had discovered Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis. Johnny auditioned with gospel numbers, but Phillips pushed him toward something grittier. The result was Cry, 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 a 1955 release that cracked the country charts. Then came Folsom Prison Blues in 1956, which climbed even higher. By 1957, I Walk the Line took him into another stratosphere. It wasn't just a hit. It became an anthem. Sparse instrumentation, unwavering rhythm, and that unmistakable baritone. Listeners couldn't ignore it. On stage, Johnny was magnetic. Dressed in black, with a guitar slung low and his jaw set like stone, he looked like no one else. He didn't jump or shout. He stared into the crowd like he had seen through them, and maybe he had. As his fame surged, Johnny's life frayed. His marriage to Vivian suffered under the weight of touring, drugs, and temptation. Amphetamines kept him wired. Barbiturates brought him down. The road offered adoration, but stole intimacy. He began to unravel. In 1956, during a recording session with Elvis, Carl Perkins, and Jerry Lee Lewis, the famed Million Dollar Quartet, Johnny had already begun using pills. By the early 1960s, his habit had grown out of control. His shows were erratic. Some nights he dazzled. Others he staggered. He wrecked hotel rooms, crashed cars, and lashed out at friends. His marriage deteriorated. Vivian, weary of his mood swings and infidelities, eventually filed for divorce in 1966. Yet amid the chaos, his artistry flourished. Albums like Ride This Train and Bitter Tears showed him willing to tackle stories of Native Americans and railroad men. He didn't chase trends. He forged his path. It was also during this time that June Carter entered his life. The daughter of country legends, June was witty, strong, and unimpressed by bravado. She saw past Johnny's mask and called out his demons. They toured together, sparking on stage and off. But while she loved him, she would not marry a man still buried in addiction. That turning point came in 1967, when Johnny, deep in despair, locked himself in a cave in Tennessee, intending never to leave. He lay on the cold floor, expecting death. Instead, something stirred inside him. A realization, a clarity. He emerged, gasping, determined to reclaim control. He turned to faith, family, and June. Clean for the first time in years, Johnny proposed to June on stage in London, Ontario, in February 1968. She said yes. That same year, they married and soon welcomed a son, John Carter Cash. But 1968 would be remembered for something more. At Folsom Prison, the live recording, captured behind bars, reignited his career. Backed by the Tennessee Three and greeted by roaring inmates, Johnny delivered a set that crackled with authenticity. Folsom Prison Blues roared. Cocaine Blues slashed. And the prisoners cheered like men who knew exactly what he meant. The album went gold. It didn't feel like a comeback. It felt like a coronation of someone who had finally found alignment between his pain and his purpose. A year later, he followed up with At San Quentin, featuring A Boy Named Sue, which became one of his biggest hits. These records weren't just live albums. They were declarations. He gave voice to the forgotten. He didn't preach. He understood. With June by his side, he found peace and structure. They recorded together, toured as a family, and blended their musical legacies. In the 1970s, Johnny stood tall. His TV show, The Johnny Cash Show, ran on ABC, bringing country, folk, and gospel into living rooms across America. Guests ranged from Bob Dylan to Louis Armstrong. He wasn't beholden to genre or party. He welcomed whoever had something real to say. He sang about injustice, war, faith, and forgiveness. He wrote books, starred in films, and remained a force on the country charts. Yet fame remained a heavy crown. His addiction, though dormant for a time, crept back in moments of stress and exhaustion. He suffered from health issues, including broken bones, surgeries, and multiple relapses. But through it all, he remained devoted to June. She became his constant, his compass. Though mainstream country began moving toward glitz and glamour, Johnny held to grit. He continued recording, but his commercial success waned. Still, he remained a legend to musicians around the world. His honesty, his integrity, his scars, all gave weight to every word he sang. As the 80s faded, Johnny was invited to join forces with Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, and Chris Christopherson. They formed the Highwaymen, releasing a self-titled album in 1985. It was a triumph among fans who yearned for music with roots. Together, they toured the world, bringing their gravelly harmonies to packed arenas. Johnny, though older and sometimes battling illness, delivered each line with depth. In the early 90s, record labels turned away. Executives believed he was past his prime. Then came Rick Rubin. Rubin, a producer known for hip-hop and heavy metal, saw something no label executive did: raw, undiluted power. He sat Johnny down with just a guitar and a microphone. The result was American Recordings, 1994. A stripped album full of haunting covers and originals. It opened a new chapter. Young listeners discovered him anew. Critics marveled. Artists from all genres expressed admiration. Suddenly, the man who had been cast aside became revered again. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Johnny recorded several more albums with Rubin. His voice, though frail, carried gravity. Songs like Hurt, a Nine Inch Nails cover, and The Man Comes Around were chilling in their rawness. The video for Hurt, filmed in the decaying House of Cash Museum, was a study in mortality. Johnny, pale and weakened, sang as though every lyric was his last breath. In 2003, tragedy struck when June Carter Cash died on May 15th. Johnny, devastated, followed her just 4 months later, on September 12th, at the age of 71. He had lived many lives: sinner, seeker, husband, father, rebel, and guide. His body failed, but his music never did.